A big welcome to part 2 of Module 1, and a congratulations to you for making it through the first part of Module 1. I hope your week went really well and you start to see some results from the diffusion techniques that you were practicing. In this part of Module 1, we're going to cover in this lesson the 3 steps to diffusion. So we're going to delve even deeper into diffusion to help you make diffusion automatic. So when anxious thoughts come up, it just becomes an automatic response that you do, kind of an innate, inherent response that you have. And then in the following lessons, we're going to troubleshoot any issues or common questions that come up surrounding diffusion to make sure that it's a really seamless and smooth process for you. Okay, so let's get right into it. Poisonous black smoke drifts over the city. The people see it and run toward the river, thousands of them jumping into it like rats, and those that run too slowly start dropping like flies. At least that's how they described it on the radio. On October 30th, 1938, CBS Radio broadcast a program called The War of the Worlds, a dramatization of H.G. Wells' famous novel about Martians invading Earth. The 1-hour episode was written, directed, and narrated by the up-and-coming actor Orson Welles. The first 2/3 of the show consisted of fake news bulletins, so there were fake reporters describing the Martian attacks, so-called live from the scene. Many listeners, however, missed the start of the show. The part where they say, okay, this is going to be a dramatization, it's just a play. So they failed to realize that it was only a radio play. They heard the breaking news and thought the Martians really were attacking. So mass panic ensued. To listeners who knew the show was just a play, the words coming out of the radio were not a problem. But for listeners who took the words literally, the experience was terrifying. And I think this provides a great analogy for the point that we covered in the lessons from last week. Words inside our head are not the problem. The problem lies in the way we respond to them. If we fuse with those words, they can easily cause us difficulties. But if we defuse, they don't. And if you've been practicing the techniques we talked about last week, you'll know what I'm talking about. And by the way, how'd your week go? Did you practice the diffusion techniques you learned? Please share your experience by leaving a comment below this video. I'd love to hear about how things went for you. And if you didn't practice them, what were the thoughts that got in the way of you doing that, of you taking that action? Please share those as well. Remember, there's no judgment. We're just trying to support you through this process. So in some ways, our minds are like a radio. Have you noticed how it always has something to say? It's always got an opinion, an idea, a prediction, a judgment, a criticism, a comparison, or a complaint. It's like listening to talk radio all day long. Sure, from time to time it quiets down, but it soon starts up again, doesn't it? It doesn't even stop broadcasting when we're asleep. So the first thing I want to cover in the second part of Module 1 is to summarize diffusion into 3 steps. Because once you get these 3 steps, you'll see how they make up the structure to every diffusion strategy. And once you truly understand these 3 steps, diffusion, like I said, starts to become automatic for you. An inherent, innate response whenever anxious thoughts pop up. Okay? All diffusion techniques, as I said, involve one or more of the following steps. When a thought hooks us, we can, number 1, notice it. Number 2, name it. Number 3, neutralize it. So let's look at each of these individually. Notice it. Noticing our thoughts is always the first step to diffusion, and often it's enough to do the job by itself. If you pause for a second and notice what your mind is doing, that opens a little space between you and your thoughts, often enough for them to lose some of their influence over you. Okay, so the first step, notice. Step number 2 is to name it. When we name the type of thoughts we're having, that often helps us diffuse from them. There are many ways to do this. I mean, you tried a couple of techniques earlier, saying, aha, here's reason giving, or here's the I can't do it story, or I'm having the thought that, right? You can silently say anything to yourself that names this particular pattern of thinking. For example, if you catch yourself worrying, you may say, oh, worrying again. If you catch yourself imagining the worst, you may say, oh, imagining the worst. If you catch yourself getting caught up in negative self-judgments, you may say, judging again. It's more effective if you can do this with a sense of humor, as if you're smiling in recognition, giving yourself a knowing wink. Aha, I just got hooked again. Okay, so second step, name it. The third step is to neutralize it. And this is an optional step that gives room for a huge amount of creativity. I use the word neutralize to mean taking your thoughts and putting them into a new context where you can see them clearly for what they are. Nothing more than pictures and words, nothing you need to fight with, cling to, or run from. In part 1 of this module, you did this in several different ways. You silently sang your thoughts. You heard them in silly voices. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of ways that you can do this. And I'm going to give you a few more ideas to kind of help stimulate your creative juices, because you can actually create your own diffusion techniques if you wish. So I encourage you to play around with them, see how they work for you, and see if you can come up with some of your own. So here are a few ideas. You could visualize the thought as a caption on a birthday card, or a slogan on a t-shirt, or even graffiti on a wall. You could say the thought aloud in a squeaky voice or a foreign accent, or sing it to the tune of your choice. You might write it down, draw it, paint it, or perhaps imagine yourself painting it on a canvas. You might visualize your thoughts as the credits of a movie, scrolling up the screen, or even in a Star Wars fashion. You can place your thoughts on clouds and let them drift across the sky. You can imagine an actor reading your thoughts from a script, or you can imagine them as text messages, emails, or pop-ups on the internet. Basically, you can do anything that helps you step back and see that thoughts are nothing more nor less than mental events, constructions of words and pictures, transient and ever-changing. So I encourage you to play with diffusion techniques throughout the day so that you can get better and better at unhooking yourself. Remember, if we want to become good at anything, there's no getting around the need to practice. And in addition to practicing these ultra-quick diffusion techniques, I invite you to try a longer one called Leaves on a Stream. Ideally, you'd practice this one for 5 to 10 minutes once or twice a day. The more, the better. And I've included a recording I made with instructions how to do the Leaves on the Stream exercise below this video. And it's actually something that I include as part of the Calm Living's Social Confidence Starter Kit, so you may recognize it. After you've completed the exercise, take a moment to notice. Did you get repeatedly hooked and pulled out of the exercise? If so, that's absolutely normal. However, each time you realize you've been hooked, proceed to unhook yourself again. And in doing that, you're developing a valuable skill. And that's how you practice diffusion. So the Leaves on a Stream is an exercise to help you develop and hone your skill of diffusion. Now, people tend to have a wide range of reactions to this exercise. Some folks love it, some folks hate it at first, and most people lie somewhere in between. And that's all good. At first, I was a little hesitant too when I first learned this exercise. But I found that after a couple of weeks of daily practice, I came to really enjoy it. So I encourage you to persist at least for a week or two in practicing Leaves on a Stream. And if you're wondering how exactly will this practice help you to develop social confidence, well, let's think through this together. Just imagine, you've done it. You've taken the plunge, you've stepped out of your comfort zone and put yourself into that challenging social situation. You're about to give that talk or ask that person for a date, you're mingling at the party, or waiting to go through that door for your big interview. Your fight or flight response is kicked in, and your mind is now going into a tailspin. Maybe it's predicting disaster, maybe it's telling you that you can't handle it, maybe it's simply piling on the pressure, warning you of what's at stake and what could go wrong. And yet, it's not a problem. Those thoughts just float on by like leaves on a stream. You don't have to challenge them or squash them, you just let them come and go, as if they were merely cars driving past outside your house. Because you're not investing any effort in fighting them, disputing them, or suppressing them, you can now put your energy into taking effective action. And because you're not entangled in your thoughts, you can engage fully in whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, so I hope that gives you a better idea of why we'd want to practice leaves on a stream. Now, you wouldn't practice leaves on a stream when you're in the middle of a challenging situation, like in that acute moment. It's a training exercise to help develop the skill of diffusion. And once this skill is developed, we can go into any challenging situation, diffuse from our thoughts spontaneously, without needing to rely on any techniques. Okay? One of my clients is a dancer. Whenever she attended an audition, she'd get so entangled in thoughts of failure that she'd be unable to focus on what she was doing. And as a result, she wouldn't dance very well, and she'd fail the audition. Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, once she started practicing leaves on a stream every day for about 20 minutes, she soon noticed a huge difference. At auditions, her mind would still generate plenty of thoughts about failure, but she was able to let them come and go without getting wrapped up in them. She could focus on her routine and dance much better. So did this help her self-confidence? Of course it did. It absolutely did. Okay, so I hope that illustrates the reason for recommending you to practice the leaves on a stream exercise daily to develop your diffusion skills. So I definitely encourage you to incorporate leaves on a stream as part of your daily practice. Schedule it in as part of your daily schedule. Alright, so let's head on over to the next video where we'll cover some of the most common concerns people run into about diffusion, and I'll explain exactly how you can troubleshoot them, how you can overcome these concerns and obstacles. Alright, so I'll see you there.